A long time ago, in the year 1978, there was a boy who lived in the forest with Brian Ferry. Now, Brian Ferry, if you don't know who he is the lead singer of the glam art rock band Roxy Music. However, fewer people know that he is also a magical spirit, the patron of all young, mod, and glam-inclined teens and preteens, the beautiful children who like to tease their hair and wear glitter makeup. The boy who lived with him was called Vince, and he was the prince of the mods. Vince and Brian lived in a house made out of bus tickets, and Brian instructed him in the ways of the forest. However, being a famous musician as he was, Brian was often called away to go on tour, and whenever he left the forest, he would leave Vince in the care of the many animals who lived there. On one such occasion, he left Vince to be looked after by Jahuli the leopard. Vince and Jahuli went hunting and slaughtered a gazelle which they ate with gleeful pleasure. Brian was a vegetarian, you see, and Vince was not usually allowed to eat meat. After they'd finished, it was so hot in the jungle and Vince was so full that he laid himself down on Jahuli's rippling belly and got ready to have a lovely little nap. When, suddenly, Kaluni, the dirty cobra, came slithering up the tree, and he said to Vince, "Oh, you should never sleep." Vince looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Why should I never sleep?"
"Ah," said Kaluni, "because if you fall asleep, then the monkey folk will steal your face."
Vince blinked at him. What you want to... why?" And so, Kaluni explained. Apparently, the king of the monkeys was convinced that to be a proper ruler, he needed a man's face, and he had seen the boy Vince's face, and decided that it was the one he wanted. So Vince tried his hardest not to fall asleep, but he was so full, and it was so hot in the jungle, and the sunlight was filtering down so softly through the leaves, that soon he could no longer keep his eyelids propped open, and he fell into a deep slumber. Many, many miles away from where the boy Vince lay slumbering, there lived another boy called Howard. Howard loved prog and glam music. He loved David Bowie and Roxy Music and T-Rex and The Who. His room was covered in posters, and he would blast his music night and day, much to the chagrin of his parents, who preferred jazz. And Howard had heard of the young boy who lived in the forest with Brian Ferry, the prince of the mods. And one day he decided that he was going to leave his life behind and go seek him out. So that day he put on his best skinny tie and pinstripe suit and put on just a little bit of glitter and hopped on a bus to go seek out Brian Ferry's adoptive son. When he arrived in the forest and found the boy, however, he was greeted with a terrible sight. The boy Vince, fast asleep, was surrounded by a circle of jeering monkeys, with the Monkey King crouched on his chest with a knife in his hand. Howard cried out before he could stop himself, and the Monkey King looked over at him. "Who are you?" "I'm Howard," Howard stuttered. "What are you doing?" "I'm a taking the boy Vince's face, and there's nothing you can do about it, so shove off." But Howard was torn. The boy looked so beautiful and innocent and peaceful, lying there asleep. And besides, he was the prince of the mods. He was everything Howard stood for. He couldn't let the monkeys steal his face. And so then, Howard did something a little bit stupid. But stupid in the best way, the kind of thoughtless, selfish altruism of a child who sees something beautiful and just wants to keep it that way. So he squared himself and he stood up as tall as he could, and he looked the Monkey King straight in the eye and he said, "Take my face if you need one. You can't have his." And the Monkey King looked at him curiously, and then he turned to his monkey people and asked them what they thought. And they said, "Oh, his face is not as good as the boy Vince's face." But another said, "Ah, but a face that is freely given will stick much longer than a face that is stolen. And so the Monkey King agreed. He would take Howard's face in lieu of that of the Prince of the Mods. "You're gonna need a new face, though," he said, and sent his people to go search through all the faces they had stored up. Eventually, they came back with the face of a 43-year-old bus driver/poet from Leeds. And when Howard quailed, just a little, and we can hardly blame him, the Monkey King snorted. "You'll grow into it soon enough. You ain't a mod anyway, giving away your face like that. You're one of them action men. They age quicker than mods and rock stars." And then the Monkey King approached, with his burning eyes and his knife in his hand, and Howard squeezed his eyes shut and did his best not to scream. When Howard woke up, he was back in his own bedroom, and he felt strange. He didn't know how strange, though, until he put on his precious Ziggy Stardust LP, and the resultant noise just seemed like noise to him. He wrinkled his nose. Had he actually liked this? And so he went through the rest of his records, one by one. And one by one they went back into their slipcovers, and he packed them up into a box to take down to the record store to sell. He took down his posters, too. The sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes made him uneasy. His walls were bare now, blank, bland beige. It seemed to be waiting for something. Howard couldn't tell what. His parents put his new face down to the rapid changes of puberty, and were mostly just glad that he'd stopped playing his records at 3 in the morning. The next week, a new boy showed up at Howard's school. He had the strangest face Howard had ever seen, a bizarre collection of points and peculiar angles under a ridiculous fluffy haircut, and huge shining eyes, and he'd already started to customize his uniform jacket with glitter and badges. He sat next to Howard in his history class, and one day he leaned over and he said, "All right, I'm Vince. Do you want a flying saucer?" Now, Howard didn't remember his journey to the forest, or saving the Prince of the Mods from face-stealing monkeys, but he knew that there was something about the new kid, even though he looked like all the posters Howard had taken down off his walls, that he liked right away. So he held out his hand under his desk and he said, "I'm Howard." And when Vince grinned at him, Howard grinned right back.